Ambassador Daniel Harris gazed out of the viewport as the USS Horizon decelerated, the Galactic Confederation's central hub coming into focus. The massive space station stretched across the void, a testament to millennia of advanced alien engineering. Circular in shape, the station's shimmering surface was a striking contrast to the surrounding blackness, with glistening panels reflecting distant starlight. He was a man of many crises, but this was the culmination of years of diplomatic groundwork. Earth's first official mission to the Confederation, and his role was pivotal. "Magnificent, isn't it?" Daniel murmured, though his voice betrayed no awe. At 53, with his salt and pepper hair and calm demeanor, he was a man accustomed to high-pressure situations. The Confederation represented hope and uncertainty for Earth. His task was simple: to convince the galaxy that humanity was not a threat, but a new ally. Captain Elizabeth Mercer stood beside him, her posture rigid and professional. Her sharp eyes scanned the space station, her military instincts never resting. "It's certainly impressive, but I'm not sure about this unescorted approach." "Why just one ship?" she mused, her voice betraying her concern. "We've talked about this before," Daniel replied. "We're a newcomer. They want to see us as just that. The Confederation's methods may be more formal than we're used to." Dr. Alan Palmer, the xenolinguist and expert in alien cultures, joined them on the bridge, his usual calm replaced by mild concern. "That's true, Ambassador, but these scans are unlike anything we've been briefed on. It doesn't match the patterns from our prior communications." The USS Horizon was Earth's crowning achievement, sleek, imposing, and designed to represent humanity's best interests. On board, the delegation of diplomats, scientists, and military personnel had been carefully chosen to present a unified front. But there was more at play here than just a diplomatic mission. Earth had been quietly preparing for years. Hidden behind the surface of peace was the undeniable reality. Earth had known the Confederation for far longer than the official records would suggest. "We're being hailed," Lieutenant Paul Martinez called from his communication station, the sterile tone in his voice not disguising the intensity of the moment. "On-screened," Elizabeth ordered. The screen flickered to life, revealing a being with scaled blue skin, its eyes arranged in a triangular formation. A Talaxian, the species that had founded the Confederation. The formality in its voice was evident. "USS Horizon, this is docking control. Proceed to Bay 17. Deviation from the coordinates will not be tolerated." The words were polite, but there was no warmth in them. "We're following your guidance," Elizabeth responded, her tone tight but professional. The transmission ended, and as the screen went dark, she exchanged a glance with Daniel. "Is it just me, or did that feel off?" she asked. "That wasn't nearly as cordial as our previous communications." "I noticed it too," Daniel replied. "Let's stay alert." Dr. Palmer leaned over his tablet, his brows furrowing as he reviewed the data. "This isn't just a tone shift," he said quietly. "I've cross-checked their language patterns with previous messages. There's something else. Subtle, but significant. They're using more imperative language, fewer diplomatic courtesies." Daniel's mind churned with these observations, but he said nothing aloud. The signs were unmistakable, and they didn't sit well with him. "Keep monitoring. It could be a different communications officer, or maybe this is something else entirely." As the Horizon neared the docking bay, Daniel retreated to his quarters, a sense of unease settling over him. The sleek interior of his room contrasted sharply with the somber weight of the task ahead. He opened a small case and removed a golden pin, shaped like Earth's continents, securing it on his lapel. It was a symbol of his authority, but also something far more crucial. A quantum link emergency beacon, one press, and Earth would know that something had gone terribly wrong. His personal communication device pinged, the image of his wife, Lisa, appearing on the screen. Despite the distance, the quantum link allowed them to communicate as if they were in the same room. "Hey, honey," he said, smiling despite the weight on his shoulders. "Just about to dock." "How are you feeling?" she asked, her concern palpable even through the screen. "Like I'm carrying the weight of Earth on my shoulders," he admitted. "But I'm ready." Her eyes flickered with worry. The president called again. She wanted me to remind you. Protocol Phoenix is ready if needed. Daniel nodded solemnly. Protocol Phoenix, Earth's contingency plan, designed for a situation just like this. He had hoped it would never come to this, but as the first human ambassador to the galaxy, he knew the risks. Let's hope it's not necessary. I should have good news when I call tomorrow. After a final exchange of loving words, Daniel finished preparing himself for the meeting. His suit was immaculate, dark navy with the Earth emblem boldly displayed on his breast pocket. Few would suspect he had once been a decorated military strategist before he shifted to diplomacy. The ship shuddered slightly as it docked. Daniel stood, straightened his jacket, and made his way to the main deck. Elizabeth and Dr. Palmer were waiting for him, surrounded by a small security detail and 2 additional diplomats. Remember, we represent all of humanity today, Daniel addressed the group, his voice firm but calm. Our goal is peaceful admission into the Confederation. We follow their protocols, but stay alert. The airlocks cycled open, and the crew stepped into the wide corridors of the station. The grandeur of the place was undeniable, but Daniel noticed the eyes of the other aliens. Curious, suspicious, and at times outright hostile. The Confederation's technology was astounding, with transparent aluminum windows, gravity manipulation fields, and beings from all walks of life moving purposefully. Yet, despite the technological marvel, there was something chilling about the welcome. As they entered the Grand Assembly Hall, a vast amphitheater filled with representatives from across the galaxy, the tension thickened. The room fell silent as the human delegation entered, their every movement scrutinized by hundreds of alien eyes. Elizabeth leaned in, her voice barely above a whisper. Sir, this doesn't feel like a welcome. The security, it's too tight. Daniel nodded, his mind racing. The air felt thick with suspicion, not the warm reception they had been promised. As they approached the central platform, a tall, gray-skinned being stepped forward. General Vexner, a military leader from the Vorn species, known for their aggressive nature. He was flanked by other high-ranking officials, including the High Arbiter, Claxier, an alien with multiple eyes who was supposed to remain neutral. The Grand Assembly was not the place for peaceful talks. It was a tribunal. You stand accused of concealing Earth's true intentions. Vexner's voice rang out, his words echoing across the chamber. We seek only peace. Daniel responded calmly, but his insides churned as he realized the gravity of what was happening. Earth wasn't being welcomed. They were being set up. The display that followed was a holographic illusion, a fabricated representation of a hidden war fleet. Earth, a peaceful civilization, was being falsely accused of aggression. These are lies, Daniel declared, stepping forward. We possess no such fleet, we came in peace. The chamber erupted in hostility, the tension palpable, and as the vote to execute Daniel Harris was swiftly called, he knew that diplomacy had failed. A trap had been sprung, and Earth was about to face the consequences. Yet, hidden deep within the heart of the human delegation, a quiet signal was sent to Earth. A beacon, and with it, Earth's response was set in motion. The countdown had begun. The USS Horizon's landing bay doors opened with a soft hiss, and the crew of the human delegation stepped into the heart of the Galactic Confederation's central hub. The gleaming expanse before them seemed to hum with activity, as representatives from various species moved purposefully along the corridors. Daniel Harris, Ambassador of Earth, led the delegation, flanked by Captain Elizabeth Mercer, Dr. Alan Palmer, and a small team of security personnel. The air was thick with the weight of expectation. This was the moment humanity had waited for. But something felt off. As they walked through the main passageways of the station, Daniel couldn't shake the sensation that they were being watched. Not with the welcoming gaze he had hoped for, but with suspicion. The eyes of alien delegates turned toward them, curious, cautious, even hostile in some instances. Every hallway seemed lined with unfamiliar faces, their expressions veiled with a coldness that undermined the warmth Earth had expected. It wasn't the warm reception he had imagined. Do you feel that? Elizabeth asked, her voice low as she fell into step beside Daniel. "I've never been in a place with so much tension." "It's not just you," Daniel replied, his brow furrowing. The hallway around them was vast, with panoramic views of the station's mechanical inner workings. But the welcoming bustle of it all felt forced, as if they were intruders in a place that had no room for them. The Confederation should be celebrating this, our first official mission. Instead, I feel like we're being watched. Dr. Palmer, who had been scanning his tablet intently, joined them. His usual calm demeanor was replaced with a look of concern. "Ambassador, I've been listening in on some of the side chatter, and it's odd. Some of these species are using coded language when referring to Earth. There's something off about their tone." Daniel shot him a glance. "Coded? What do you mean?" "I can't pinpoint it yet," Dr. Palmer said, adjusting his glasses as he studied his device. "But it's as though they're hiding something. The language has shifted, from polite formalities to something more calculating." Elizabeth turned her attention to the alien crowd moving past them, taking note of their subtle movements. "So they're preparing for something," she muttered. "Something beyond the usual bureaucracy." The group continued forward, following a set of security personnel down the hallway. The walls, lined with smooth, transparent panels, displayed bustling scenes from around the Confederation's various worlds, showcasing the diversity of the galaxy. But instead of filling Daniel with awe, the shifting images only added to his unease. Nothing felt genuine. As they approached the grand meeting hall, the towering form of an alien figure awaited them. A Talaxian, the species that had founded the Confederation. Coordinator Selmarin, as he introduced himself, stood at the entrance, extending his long, iridescent hand to Daniel in a formal greeting. Despite the outward politeness, there was a coldness in the gesture, a calculated formality. The coordinator's four eyes regarded Daniel with a hint of skepticism, his expression controlled but distant. "Ambassador Harris?" Selmarin said in smooth, accented English. "I am pleased to welcome you to the Confederation's central hub. I trust your journey has been comfortable?" Daniel returned the handshake firmly, but he felt the chill in Selmarin's words. "Yes, thank you, Coordinator. It's an honor to be here. Earth looks forward to working closely with the Confederation." "We have been anticipating your arrival," Selmarin responded, though his voice carried no warmth. "The Grand Assembly is eager to hear your proposal." As they passed into the chamber, the tension in the air grew thicker. Daniel noticed the oddities, gathering eyes that seemed to follow them, the increased security around the entrance, and the subtle shift in tone among the Confederation's leaders. They were no longer just diplomatic officials. These were people who had something to hide. Elizabeth leaned closer to Daniel as they moved deeper into the hall. "This doesn't feel right. The tighter security, the looks. They're not just wary of us. They're afraid." "I feel it too," Daniel replied quietly, scanning the assembly hall. The walls of the chamber stretched high above them, adorned with images of past intergalactic peace agreements. Yet the atmosphere felt far from peaceful. This was no ordinary diplomatic meeting. It was something else entirely, Dr. Palmer whispered, still scanning his tablet. "There's a change in their language. More aggressive undertones. They're talking about Earth as if it's a threat." Daniel's steps faltered for a moment as he absorbed the implications. "Are they preparing for war?" "I don't think they've decided yet," Palmer replied, "but they're treating us as if we're an unknown quantity, and that's never a good sign." The three continued their walk until they arrived at the central platform, where a circle of high-ranking aliens awaited them. Daniel could immediately spot the most formidable among them, General Vexner, a Vorn military leader known for his strategic brilliance and violent tendencies. His eyes locked onto Daniel with a mixture of disdain and cold calculation. The High Arbiter Claxier, a spindly alien with multiple eyes, took his position next to Vexnor. "Ambassador Harris," Claxier announced in a voice that sent a ripple of unease through the room. "We have gathered here to discuss the future of Earth's place within the Galactic Confederation. There are concerns that must be addressed before you are allowed to make your case." Daniel's pulse quickened. He had known this moment would come, but he wasn't prepared for the sudden shift in tone. "Concerns? What kind of concerns?" he asked, his voice steady despite the rising tension. General Vexner stepped forward, his gray skin gleaming under the chamber lights. "You stand accused of withholding crucial information about Earth's military capabilities. We have evidence that your planet is preparing for expansion, not peace." The chamber grew silent, and every eye seemed to focus on Daniel, the weight of accusation hanging in the air. "This is a lie," Daniel said, his voice firm. "We came in peace, to foster cooperation and mutual benefit." A holographic display flickered to life behind Vexnor, showing what appeared to be a fleet of warships under construction. The images were clearly fabricated, but they looked convincing enough to stir unease among the gathered delegates. "This is not our fleet," Daniel stated, his heart racing. "You've been deceived." A murmur rippled through the assembly, and Daniel felt the sharp sting of betrayal. The Confederation was not here to welcome Earth, it was here to judge and condemn them. "Enough," Claxier interrupted, raising one of his many arms. "We have heard enough. The Assembly will now vote on the classification of Earth as a Level 1 threat to galactic security. This vote will determine whether Earth remains a part of the Confederation or whether it must be neutralized." Daniel's mind raced as he stood there, trapped in the midst of a political storm he had never anticipated. The room seemed to close in around him. It wasn't just a simple misunderstanding. This was a well-orchestrated trap. The Confederation had no intention of allowing Earth into their fold. He turned to Elizabeth, his voice barely above a whisper. "This isn't what we were promised. We need to act, and quickly." Elizabeth met his gaze, her lips pressed into a tight line. "I don't think we have a choice anymore. If they vote to classify us as a threat, there will be no going back." Before Daniel could respond, a sudden chill ran through him. He reached up, instinctively touching the golden pin on his lapel, the beacon that would send an emergency signal back to Earth. If Earth was going to respond, it had to be now. But the question that gnawed at him was this: would Earth be ready when the storm hit? The assembly hall fell into a deafening silence as the hologram flickered to life. A massive, swirling projection of Earth's supposed military assets filled the center of the chamber. It showed images of warships under construction, weapons platforms assembling in space, and strategic fleets positioned on Earth's outer rim. The light from the display glinted off the cold faces of the Confederation's leaders, all eyes locked on the false evidence. General Vexner, with his towering presence and stone-like expression, stepped forward, his voice echoing through the vast hall. "Ambassador Harris, the evidence is irrefutable. Earth has been preparing for war, not peace. These images were captured from our intelligence sources, showing clear signs of a fleet under construction, hidden from our view for years. You stand here before us, lying, while your species plans for domination." Daniel Harris's pulse quickened, but he held his ground. He could feel the weight of every eye on him. This was it, the moment where diplomacy could either save them or plunge them into irreversible conflict. He inhaled deeply and stepped forward, his voice firm but measured. "General Vexnor, these images are a fabrication. Earth has no such fleet. I deny these baseless accusations. We came in peace as emissaries of cooperation." A murmur rippled through the assembly. The hologram shifted, expanding to show more images, but the distortion was too obvious, too carefully crafted. Daniel's eyes narrowed, his mind racing. This wasn't just a misunderstanding, this was a deliberate attack on Earth's credibility. He turned to Dr. Palmer, who had been quietly analyzing the holographic projections from his station. "Ambassador, I've compared these images with our own data. They're doctored," Palmer whispered urgently. "The patterns don't match anything we've observed on Earth. It's all been altered." But the chamber's attention was not on Dr. Palmer's analysis. It was fixed on Daniel, waiting for his next words. Daniel knew that any sign of hesitation, now, would be taken as a sign of weakness. "I understand the implications of these images, but I assure you, they do not reflect the reality of Earth's intentions," Daniel continued, his voice cutting through the mounting hostility. "We are not your enemy. Our goal is cooperation and understanding, not war. The silence that followed was suffocating. No one spoke. Even the High Arbiter Claxier, who had been sitting back in his grand chair, observing with an unreadable expression, seemed to deliberate on his next move. The murmurs in the room grew louder, but it was Vexner who broke the silence. "We cannot ignore the clear evidence," the Vorn general said, his voice ringing with finality. "The Confederation cannot afford to let this lie go unchecked. Ambassador Harris, your words cannot change what is clear to all of us. You and your people will be judged accordingly." Daniel's stomach tightened. This wasn't just about an accusation. It was an execution in the making. "This is a farce," he muttered under his breath, but it was loud enough for the delegates in the front row to hear. "Enough!" Clax's voice reverberated throughout the hall, an eerie calmness in contrast to the rising tension. "The evidence has been presented. The Assembly has heard the arguments. We will proceed with the vote on whether to classify humanity as a threat to the Confederation. The consequences of this decision are dire, and it will be decided today." Daniel turned to Captain Mercer, who was standing beside him, her jaw clenched, her eyes flashing with concern. "This can't be happening. They're going to execute me," Daniel muttered, more to himself than anyone else. Elizabeth's face darkened and she stepped closer, her voice low. "We're not going to let them do this. There's got to be something we can do. Something we missed." Daniel shook his head, his heart sinking. "We've done everything by their rules, and it's still not enough. We're caught in their web." The High Arbiter raised a hand, signaling the Assembly to silence. "The vote will now take place," he intoned, his voice cold and detached. "We shall determine the fate of the human ambassador, and by extension, the fate of Earth's membership in the Confederation." Daniel stood, bracing himself for what was about to come. The vote, once a mere formality in his mind, was now a death sentence hanging over his head. The chamber seemed to close in around him, the faces of the delegates a blur, the sharp sting of betrayal evident in their cold expressions. As the vote proceeded, the chamber grew unbearably still. Daniel's eyes flicked from one delegate to another, but no one met his gaze. The few who had spoken out in favor of humanity's peaceful intentions were now silent, cowed by the overwhelming militaristic presence that had seized control of the Confederation. One by one, the votes were cast, and the tally was read aloud. By a majority vote, the Assembly has agreed to classify humanity as a Level 1 threat species. Ambassador Daniel Harris is hereby sentenced to immediate execution as a warning to all species who would defy the will of the Confederation. The words echoed in Daniel's ears, but they made no sense. This was supposed to be a diplomatic mission, a step toward peace. Yet here he stood, condemned by a corrupt political system, manipulated by factions that had no intention of letting Earth into their fold. "No," Daniel whispered, his breath catching in his throat. "This can't be." Before he could finish, the floor beneath him shifted, and a translucent energy field rose around him, enveloping him completely. The chamber was silent, the audience frozen in place, as the High Arbiter's cold voice filled the room. "Ambassador Daniel Harris, for your defiance, you are sentenced to disintegration. This action is necessary to preserve the stability of the Confederation." Daniel's heart pounded in his chest, but he remained resolute. He would not be the one to falter. The entire delegation stood in shock, unable to move, as the energy field crackled with a harsh, white light. "Earth will not bow to intimidation," Daniel said, his voice steady despite the rising fear. "Remember that we came in peace." The words were his last, broadcast to Earth, to his wife, to everyone who had believed in the possibility of peace. The energy field intensified, and in a flash of blinding light, Daniel Harris was gone. The human delegation stood frozen, their eyes wide in disbelief. It had all happened so quickly, too quickly for them to respond. The Confederation had acted with ruthless efficiency, and in an instant, Earth's first ambassador was no more. The galaxy had just witnessed a betrayal of the highest order. The High Arbiter stood still, his expression unreadable. General Vexter's lips curled into a satisfied smile. The Confederation had made its point. But as the light faded and the last traces of Daniel's presence disappeared from the hall, a small golden pin in the shape of Earth's continents glowed briefly before the chamber went dark. The beacon had been activated. Earth had felt the loss, and soon the Confederation would feel the wrath of a world that had prepared for this moment. As the delegates left the hall, whispering among themselves, the human delegation remained motionless, shocked into silence. The reality of what had just happened had not yet fully sunk in. But one thing was clear. The galaxy had just made an enemy it could not afford to underestimate. The message from the Galactic Confederation had come through loud and clear, and the shockwave of Daniel Harris's execution reverberated across Earth. For a moment, the world stood still. Every broadcast station across the planet displayed his final moments in stark clarity, his defiance, his resolve, and his last words. Earth will not bow to intimidation. The raw emotion of the scene left a deep scar on humanity, but where shock and disbelief should have spread like wildfire, an unexpected clarity settled in. A shift, a quiet awakening. They knew what was coming next. In the heart of the Antarctic Command Center, President Laura Wilson sat motionless, staring at the screens in front of her. The room was tense with a quiet urgency. The security personnel, the advisors, the commanders, none of them had moved, save for the rapid glances at their terminals. The moment they had dreaded, the reason Protocol Phoenix existed had come to fruition. They had no choice now. The time for diplomacy had ended. With an icy determination, Wilson spoke the words that would alter the course of history. "Activate Protocol Phoenix," she ordered, her voice steadied despite the weight of the decision. Her command set into motion a sequence of events that had been prepared for years in secrecy. Across the solar system, hidden fleet formations began to stir. Ships that had sat dormant within asteroid fields, beneath the surface of moons and even inside gas clouds near Jupiter. Ships far beyond anything the Confederation could imagine, came to life. Each ship a silent sentinel of humanity's hidden might. Admiral Frank Donovan stood before his team, the gravity of the moment unspoken but felt in every measured step. He glanced at the holo map, a sea of blinking red dots representing the Confederation's military installations scattered across the galaxy. His team worked with methodical precision, their fingers dancing over the heads-up displays. On screen, the first phase of the Retaliation began, the USS Retribution, humanity's warship of unimaginable power, fired up its engines. The ship, hidden in the shadows of Saturn's rings, shot out from its cover in a sudden burst of motion. "Deploy," Donovan barked, and just like that, the fleet scattered across the galaxy. From Mars' hollow mountains to Neptune's distant orbit, from Earth's deep space bases to the craters of the moon, humanity's fleet emerged. Silent, but lethal. "Commander Olivia Clark, initiate the first wave," Donovan ordered over comms. On board the Retribution, Commander Clark was already in motion, moving through her ship's massive bridge, her sharp gaze never leaving the laser plasma displays before her. "Deploy all tactical units," Clark said, her voice cold with resolve. "We strike fast, no hesitation. Disable their fleets, take out their weapons systems, but leave their civilian stations intact. No collateral." It was a calculated strike. Earth's retaliation would not be one of brute force or mindless destruction. Each move, each ship, had a specific mission. The Confederation's defenses were about to be crippled, but in such a way that their ability to retaliate would be severed without civilian casualties. Earth's military had advanced beyond anything the Confederation knew. Thanks to alien technology reverse-engineered over decades of covert operations. As the first wave of Earth's ships entered Confederation space, alarms blared across military stations. The first victims were the weapon platforms orbiting various alien planets, each one crippled by sudden electronic interference. Ships that had once been invulnerable were now drifting, their propulsion systems incapacitated, their weapons disabled in an instant. "How?" an alien commander shouted, watching as his once pristine fleet turned to floating wreckage. His command center was awash in flashing red lights, but there was no time for him to process the situation. The human ships were already on their way to the next target. Commander Clark's fleet continued its surgical operations, targeting Confederation defense grids, military hubs, and strategic stations. No civilian infrastructure was harmed. The purpose of this mission wasn't revenge. It was justice. It was a statement. And it would be heard across the galaxy. Meanwhile, Major Sophia Grant led the strike team on the ground. In a remote location far beyond the reach of the Confederation's sensors, her Special Forces team moved with precision, breaching secure facilities that held vital military leadership. Using stealth tactics and advanced infiltration technology, they incapacitated key commanders before they could even understand what was happening. It was chaos for the Confederation, but not in the way they had planned. Major Grant, the first 3 high-value targets are down, a comm officer reported through her earpiece. Next target in range. Keep moving, Grant ordered, her focus unwavering. We're not here to destroy, we're here to dismantle their hold on power and show the galaxy exactly who they've been underestimating. As the fleet moved through Confederation space, Earth's technological superiority began to show. The power of their ships was evident not in the destruction left in their wake, but in the way their presence was felt. A reminder that humanity had been watching and preparing for this day. The Confederation, for all its advancements, had missed one crucial element: Earth's ability to adapt and innovate beyond their expectation. In every corner of Confederation space, chaos spread. Communications were jammed, military commands were cut off, and a new wave of fear swept through the Confederation. But Earth's ships did not stop. The USS Retribution stood as the crown jewel of their fleet, its immense size overshadowing anything the Confederation had seen. General Vexner will be taken alive, Clark ordered, as the Retribution moved towards the heart of the Confederation's military base. He will face justice, not just for his role in Ambassador Harris's death, but for the crimes he's committed in the name of domination. The galaxy's most feared warlord was about to be neutralized, not through the annihilation of his forces, but through a quiet but undeniable truth. Earth was not the weak species they had believed. Earth had not come to conquer, it had come to right the wrongs. The galaxy would learn that when Earth said it would not bow to intimidation, it meant every word. As the operations continued, the message was broadcast across the galaxy. The Confederation, which had once believed it stood at the apex of galactic power, now found itself crumbling under the weight of its own hubris. Earth had come to reclaim its place among the stars, not with forceful oppression, but with calculated, unyielding precision. And as the Retribution's final strike disabled the last of the Confederation's defensive grid, the crew stood at attention. They had done what they had set out to do. Earth had responded. Not with blind rage, but with strategic justice. The message was clear. "We've taken action," Admiral Donovan said, his eyes fixed on the view screen. "But this isn't a conquest. This is a declaration of peace. Earth will never back down, and the Confederation will learn that the hard way." As the fleet settled into its newly secured positions, humanity's message echoed through the galaxy, leaving no room for doubt. The Confederation had misjudged them, and now it was time to pay the price. The first cracks in the Galactic Confederation's military might had already begun to show, but by the time Earth's forces moved into full operational coordination, the Empire's fragile control unraveled quickly. General Vexner, the architect of Ambassador Daniel Harris's execution, had long been a symbol of strength within the Confederation, yet his grip on power was slipping as Earth's forces systematically dismantled the very structures that had held the galaxy's most powerful factions together. Across Confederation space, the impossible was becoming undeniable. Humanity had not just arrived to assert itself. They were a force that could not be ignored, a force that could not be stopped. On board the USS Retribution, Commander Olivia Clark watched as another tactical display blinked to life on the laser plasma screen. The military faction's defensive lines were crumbling. Earth's ships moved in unison, cutting off supply chains, disabling weapon systems, and incapacitating warships without a single shot fired. It was an art, an operation so precise that it almost seemed surgical. The main military fleet, previously so formidable, had been reduced to helplessness. One by one, key Confederation assets were neutralized. "We're taking them down, one node at a time," Clark said, her voice cold, focused. "General Vexner's flagship is in range, Commander," said Lieutenant Aaron Kowalski, his eyes glued to the heads-up display. Clark's fingers hovered over the controls. "Lock on. We'll disable their engines first, then we move in." As Earth's fleet advanced, the story of strategic brilliance unfolded in real time. Every ship, every maneuver, was designed to incapacitate, not destroy. Earth was making its statement not through sheer force, but through calculated, deliberate justice. The intention was clear. This wasn't an invasion. It was an effort to restore balance, to ensure that the galaxy could never again forget the consequences of underestimating humanity. General Vextor's fleet tried to rally, but it was too late. Earth's military force overwhelmed them at every turn. Vextor's commanders attempted to reorganize, but without communication, without cohesion, their efforts were futile. Their ships simply ceased to function. Tactical errors, failures to adapt. Everything they had built to dominate the galaxy fell apart before their eyes. "All fleets disabled. We have Vexner's command ship in sight," Kowalski reported. "We have him," Clark said, a sharp edge in her voice. "Prepare for capture." Despite the technological superiority of Earth's forces, there was no euphoria in Clark's voice. The fight wasn't about victory. It was about ensuring that the Confederation's false narrative was erased, and that the galaxy would never again forget the price of betrayal. The thought of Daniel Harris, his final moments, his unwavering commitment to peace, fueled every move. Meanwhile, back on Earth, President Laura Wilson stood in the heart of the Antarctic Command Center. With the Confederation crumbling under the weight of Earth's power, there was little joy in her expression. The true cost of what had happened was felt in the silence of the room. Earth had retaliated, yes, but it was the death of their ambassador that had triggered it all. She gripped the edge of the command table, her face set in a grim mask of resolve. "We've taken control of their most vital military hubs, Madam President," Admiral Fran Donovan reported, his voice steady, betraying none of the tension beneath the surface. "Vexner's position is compromised. We'll have him in custody within the hour." Wilson nodded, her eyes never leaving the large holographic map in front of her. "This is about more than justice. It's about showing them that humanity will never be subjugated again." As the final ships in Vexner's fleet were disabled, a ripple of panic spread across the Confederation. No one had expected Earth to act with such force, with such control. No one had expected humanity's intelligence, its ability to foresee threats and respond with lethal precision. The galaxy had seen Earth as a young, underdeveloped species, naive in its ambitions. But this new Earth, this new power, was something the galaxy was not prepared for. With the military infrastructure of the Confederation in ruins, political instability quickly followed. The once unified leadership fractured. Delegates from various species who had once been silent under the weight of military influence began to speak up, their voices a cacophony of demands for change. The peace that had been promised at the beginning of the Galactic Confederation seemed like a distant dream as factions fought for control. The once monolithic empire splintered into chaos. Inside the Grand Assembly Chamber, the atmosphere was thick with distrust and fear. Representatives of the more militaristic species, such as the Vorn and Draxel, tried to maintain a semblance of order, but their influence was quickly waning. In contrast, representatives from species that had long been oppressed under the Confederation's rule found their voices. Their calls for reform now gaining traction. "I want every key member of the Confederation's military leadership on a transport ship to Earth," Donovan instructed. "We'll take them in, no exceptions." His command was final, and it left no room for negotiation. The leadership that had executed Harris would not survive. The remaining leaders would face trial, and Earth's moral high ground would stand as a stark contrast to the Confederation's systemic corruption. The Vorn's general, Vexnor, had once stood as a symbol of strength. Now he was nothing more than a prisoner. His once proud fleet reduced to debris. Clark, standing in front of his flagship, watched as his final ship drifted silently into a holding bay, its engines shut down for good. "General Vexnor is in custody," Clark said, her tone devoid of satisfaction, just a grim acknowledgement of the justice done. "We'll deliver him to Earth's courts." With Vexnor's capture, the final vestiges of the Confederation's oppressive military rule had been brought to its knees. Yet even as Earth's fleet continued to hold firm, the true test was now before them. The Confederation's political system had been broken open, but it had yet to be rebuilt. Earth's actions had demonstrated its strength, but the galaxy now needed to see its commitment to justice. As Wilson stood before her staff gazing at the final stages of their mission, she reflected on the path that had brought them here. What began as a peaceful mission, a chance to join the Confederation, had ended in a fierce battle for justice, with Earth standing victorious. But this was not a war for conquest. It was a fight for the values that Earth held dear. And those values would be the foundation upon which the galaxy would rebuild. "The Confederation will never again be the same," Wilson said quietly. "And Earth will stand as its equal, not through conquest, but through the strength of its morality." And so, the galaxy began to change. Earth had proven its strength. It had shown that no matter the cost, no matter the sacrifice, humanity would never bow to oppression again. The galaxy would now have to contend with the reality of Earth's place among the stars. Not as a subjugated species, but as a moral force, capable of changing the course of galactic history. The Confederation, once proud and untouchable, had fallen, and Earth had risen in its place. The walls of the war room on Earth had never felt so thick. The massive holographic display, usually filled with maps and data, now showed only the aftermath of Earth's victory. A galaxy on the brink of transformation. President Laurel Wilson stood before her staff, a stern resolve marking her every word. "We've won," she began, her voice low but forceful. "But victory isn't enough, not yet. Not while the corruption still lingers in the Confederation's bones." Admiral Frank Donovan, standing at her side, nodded solemnly. "The Confederation must be restructured. The factions that betrayed us can't just be neutralized. They must be dismantled." Wilson's gaze hardened. "Exactly. Earth did not sacrifice its people, its resources, to merely win a battle. This galaxy will know justice, not vengeance. We will demand a new Confederation, one that values fairness, transparency, and true cooperation among species. A structure where all voices are heard and the oppression of the past is never repeated." Across the galaxy, the shockwaves from Earth's intervention continued to reverberate. The once powerful military factions that had ruled the Confederation, chief among them the Vorn and the Draxel, now found themselves scrambling for survival. Their assets were gone, their leaders captured, and their power undermined by the very species they had once sought to dominate. But Earth's leadership was not simply a reaction to conquest. No, it was calculated and strategic, demanding retribution for Daniel Harris's death, but focusing all of their efforts on something far more significant. They had come to represent justice, and it would not be squandered. Back in the heart of the Antarctic Command Center, Jordan Harris, son of the slain ambassador, sat across from a man he once saw as an untouchable force, General Vexnor. The general's military prowess had long made him an influential figure within the Confederation, but now he was a prisoner, one of the first to face Earth's justice. "Tell me everything," Jordan said coldly, his eyes fixed on Vexnor's as he leaned forward. "We know you're not the only one involved in this. Who else knew about the plot against my father?" Vexnor, hands bound and a stern expression etched across his face, met his gaze, refusing to break. "You think that capturing me will change anything?" he spat. "The Confederation is vast, and the power structures that hold it together cannot be toppled by a single human ship." Jordan's lips tightened. "Maybe you're right. Maybe it can't be toppled by just one ship. But I don't need to topple the Confederation. I need to hold you accountable for your crimes." His voice was ice, devoid of any emotion. "And we'll make sure you tell us everything. There are more of you in positions of power, and we're coming for every last one." Vexnor remained silent, but the tension in the room was undeniable. Jordan's words had struck a chord, and he knew it. The trial of Vexnor would be the first of many, but it would also send a clear message. The Confederation's leadership had been built on corruption, deception, and violence, and Earth's justice would not let any of it go unpunished. Meanwhile, President Wilson's demands for reform reached the highest levels of the Confederation. She addressed the Galactic Assembly with unwavering authority, her message clear and unambiguous. "It is time for the Confederation to undergo a complete political overhaul. This galaxy is not meant to be ruled by fear, but by fairness. No species should be denied a voice because of their size, their strength, or their military capabilities," she declared, standing before a now captive council. The representatives sat in tense silence, their earlier bravado replaced by a palpable fear of the force that Earth now wielded. "The first step toward rebuilding the Confederation begins today. The corrupt factions, responsible for my husband's death, and for the suffering of countless others, will be brought to trial. We will not allow the past to be swept under the rug. The guilty will face justice." Her eyes swept across the room, making contact with each representative in turn. "And the future of this galaxy will be defined not by power or domination, but by cooperation. Equal representation for all species, transparency in decision-making, and a commitment to the principles we once claimed to uphold." The room remained silent, the weight of her words sinking in. No one had dared to challenge the Galactic Confederation's rule as Earth had. But now they were forced to listen. Jordan Harris, meanwhile, worked alongside Earth's intelligence teams to uncover the full extent of the conspiracy that had led to his father's execution. The more they uncovered, the darker the truth became. A web of manipulation stretched far beyond the Vorn. The Draxel, the Shautari, even the Talaxian. Species once seen as allies had all played roles in ensuring that Daniel Harris's death would be used as a catalyst to quash Earth's potential rise. It was a coordinated effort, spanning decades, to keep humanity out of the Confederation's inner circle. Through interrogations, debriefings, and analysis, Jordan began to piece together the full scope of the conspiracy. He discovered that Earth's rapid technological advancements had been seen as a direct threat by the Confederation's military elite. Theirs was a system built on control, and humanity's potential to rise above them was something they could not afford. Daniel Harris had been the symbol of that potential, and they had eliminated him to ensure that symbol would never take root. As the trials of the Confederation's leaders commenced, Jordan took a prominent role in overseeing the process. He ensured that every piece of evidence, every shred of corruption, was brought to light. The conspirators, once powerful figures in the galaxy, were now on trial for their crimes. The galaxy's first trial of this magnitude had begun, and Earth's voice would not be silenced. The trial was not just about the punishment of those responsible for Daniel Harris's death. It was about sending a message to the galaxy that humanity would not be crushed by the forces of tyranny. Earth's demand for justice was the foundation of the new confederation that would emerge. Across the galaxy, species that had once feared the confederations might now begin to rally behind Earth's cause. The walls of oppression were crumbling, replaced by hope for a new future. A future where every species, no matter how small or young, could stand on equal footing. And as Earth continued to dismantle the corrupt factions that had ruled for so long, one thing was certain. The Confederation, as it had existed, was no more. A new order was emerging, one built on justice, transparency, and the unshakable will of a planet that had stood up for what was right. The fall of the Confederation had begun. The once impervious walls of the Galactic Confederation had cracked, and now, through the chasm, light was streaming in. Light that had not come from stars or artificial sources, but from Earth itself. President Laura Wilson stood before a new assembly of galactic representatives, her face unwavering in its strength, as she prepared to speak. The last few weeks had been a whirlwind of seismic changes, but today, the galaxy would witness what their victory had paved the way for. A future restructured on justice, equality, and true cooperation. The reforms we set in motion, President Wilson began, her voice carrying the weight of Earth's resolve, are not just a victory for humanity. They are a victory for every species that has suffered under the thumb of militaristic dominance. A victory for every voice that had been silenced. Her words resonated throughout the assembly chamber, bouncing off the walls of the once imposing station, now transformed into a space of progress. The Vorn, Draxel, and other factions that had long controlled the Confederation, their influence weighed heavily on the scale of power, were now relegated to minor factions at best. No longer could they dominate the decision-making processes or manipulate galactic affairs to suit their own ambitions. The power structure that once ruled over this galaxy, built on fear and corruption, is crumbling. In its place stands a new order, a system where every species, regardless of size or military might, will have an equal voice, she declared. Earth's strength has shown that we do not need to dominate others to make a difference. We stand as proof that justice is more powerful than tyranny. As the words echoed through the Grand Hall, the Confederation delegates, many of whom had been former allies to Earth's oppressors, nodded cautiously. They had watched as Earth's forces dismantled the military structures of their former overlords with an unyielding, precise strike. And now, they watched as Earth's influence grew, unchallenged. Across the galaxy, the changes were beginning to take root. On the planet of the once militaristic Draxel, citizens who had lived under a heavy-handed regime found themselves unburdened for the first time in decades. In the city-state of Talax, the people celebrated in the streets, their centuries-long hopes of freedom now realized, as Earth's commitment to justice bore fruit. The oppressive military forces that had previously shaped their destinies were no longer a presence in their daily lives. As Earth's leadership continued its work, the first steps toward a new confederation were taken. A fully transparent justice system, one that would leave no room for manipulation or corruption. Every trial would be conducted in full view of all species, with no exemptions for rank or influence. Representation would no longer be determined by military strength, but by the fundamental rights of all life forms. Earth had already pushed through these reforms, and the galaxy was now watching closely, knowing that the path forward would be one of balance and cooperation. Jordan Harris, who had been so instrumental in bringing Earth's vengeance to the stars, now stood as an ambassador for the new order. He addressed a gathered assembly of diplomats and military leaders, his father's death still fresh in his heart, yet tempered by the sense of purpose that now drove him. "We are not here to conquer," Jordan said, his voice steady despite the weight of the history he carried. "We are here to establish something that will outlast us all. A galaxy where the cries of the oppressed are heard and answered with action. My father's death was a catalyst for change, but let it be known, he did not die in vain. He died for a future that now belongs to all of us." The room remained quiet, though there was a deep sense of respect in the silence. The galaxy had long feared Earth's potential, but now, they could see its power clearly. Not in its military might, but in its moral clarity, its unyielding pursuit of justice. Across the stars, Earth's peaceful transformation was being celebrated in ways that no one could have anticipated. The once fractured, cynical species within the Confederation now saw Earth as their beacon, not just of power but of hope. Earth had arrived not with guns blazing, but with a message. A message that had been delivered with such force and resolve that the galaxy could not ignore it. The hope of a new future was not just a vision, it was being realized in every corner of the galaxy. Political factions that once feasted on the fears of others now found their control slipping away. The balance of power had shifted, and for the first time in a long while the galaxy could breathe a collective sigh of relief. The Vorn had fallen from their throne, and the Draxel were losing their grip on the galaxy's heart. But this wasn't a tale of domination. It was a tale of transformation. As the new order took root, the work ahead was clear. The Confederation would require more than just reform. It would need reconciliation. Species that had once fought for dominance now found themselves working side by side, forced to recognize the value of each other's cultures, resources, and voices. Earth's influence continued to be felt in every meeting, every trial, and every decision made. It was no longer the Confederation's military powers that held the galaxy's attention. It was Earth's example of strength tempered with compassion. The galaxy, it seemed, was ready to move forward. As Earth's influence continued to expand, the threat of war and strife began to recede into the past. Earth's example had not only reshaped the Confederation, but had become a symbol for the entire galaxy. A symbol of what was possible when cooperation, not fear, was the guiding principle. In the newly reformed Galactic Assembly, President Wilson looked around at the gathered delegates, the leaders of species once at odds, now working toward a common goal. She knew that this new confederation was just the beginning, but it was a beginning unlike any other. And for the first time, the galaxy had hope. "We stand here together," Wilson said, her words carrying with them the weight of all that had been achieved. Not as conquerors, but as collaborators. Earth has shown that the strength of a galaxy lies not in its weapons, but in its ability to grow together. The galaxy, watching from every corner of space, seemed to hold its breath. And then, as if in response, the stars themselves seemed to burn just a little brighter. The galaxy had never known a shift like this before. Earth's victory, its triumph of justice and reason over corruption and fear, had reverberated throughout the farthest reaches of the Confederation. It had become clear to every species now. Humanity was not just another player in the galactic theater. Earth was the force that had changed the very rules of the game. It wasn't just their technology, their strength, or their fleet that had done it. It was their unshakable belief in justice, a belief that had altered the trajectory of history itself. As President Laura Wilson stood on the grand balcony of the Confederation's central hub, she gazed out at the monument that now rose high above the assembly, the image of her former ambassador, Daniel Harris. The memorial gleamed with an otherworldly light, its surface smooth and reflective, carved in the shape of Earth's continents. It was not just a tribute to him, to his sacrifice, but a testament to the new galaxy that was being forged under Earth's leadership. The monument, unveiled during the highest-ranking assembly since the Confederation's reformation, had become the symbol of the new era, a symbol of Earth's enduring legacy. It was impossible to look upon it without recognizing the cost that had been paid, the sacrifice that had sparked this transformation. Daniel Harris had died for this galaxy, but his death had brought more than revenge. It had brought resolution, a shift in the very fabric of interstellar governance. "Humanity has shown the galaxy what true strength is," President Wilson remarked quietly, standing beside Ambassador Samantha Reed. The two of them had watched as Harris's memorial was unveiled, knowing that this moment marked the closing of one chapter and the opening of another. The day was dawning when Earth would take its rightful place in the grand structure of galactic power. For the first time in history, humanity's influence was no longer hidden in the shadows. Their fleet, once cloaked in secrecy, was now out in the open. Earth's technological advancements, honed through decades of hidden progress, were now publicly acknowledged, their military assets and technological marvels on full display for all to see. No longer would Earth be seen as the newcomer, the species trying to prove its worth. Earth had proven itself, and now its leadership was sought after by many. Across the galaxy, formerly oppressed species, many of whom had witnessed Earth's intervention with awe and newfound respect, began to speak of Earth not with suspicion or fear, but with admiration. The Draxel, once the feared warlords of the galaxy, had seen their influence diminished. The Vorn, whose hands had stained the galactic peace with bloodshed, found themselves at the mercy of a new judicial system, one that no longer allowed tyranny to thrive unchecked. For once, peace had been achieved not through violence, but through the unstoppable momentum of justice. Jordan Harris, the son of the fallen ambassador, now stood as one of Earth's chief representatives in the new Confederation Council. He was no longer just a man who had watched his father die. He was a symbol of Earth's ongoing fight for fairness and equality. In the Council's chambers, where once his father had been executed before his eyes, Jordan stood tall. He now led discussions on the galaxy's reformation, ensuring that no species, no matter how powerful, would ever again be allowed to manipulate the system for their own gain. Justice is the bedrock of this new confederation, Jordan spoke during one of the key debates, his voice calm but firm, reflecting both the weight of his family's sacrifice and the responsibility that came with it. We will not rest until every species has a seat at the table, until the corrupt power structures that have plagued this galaxy for millennia are eradicated, replaced with fairness, transparency, and mutual respect. His words were not just rhetoric. They were a promise, one that Earth was determined to keep. The galaxy, long fractured by division and the ambition of a few, was beginning to heal. The policies that had once allowed militaristic factions to dominate were being rewritten. A new justice system, one that would hold every member of the Confederation accountable, was now being implemented. The leaders of species once feared for their power now found themselves bound by the very rules they had once broken. As the new political order took shape, it became evident that Earth's role in the galaxy was no longer one of a passive observer. Earth had earned its place at the table, not through conquest, but through a commitment to ensuring peace for all. The human fleet, while still formidable, now served as the guardians of this new order. Earth's power was undeniable, but it was not used to subjugate. It was used to protect, to preserve the rights of every species, and to ensure that no one would ever again have to live in fear of the mighty. The galaxy has learned, President Wilson continued in her address to the Assembly, that true strength lies not in force, but in the ability to guide others with fairness. We have no interest in domination. We have only one goal: to ensure that this new confederation is a place of justice and equality. As she spoke, the atmosphere in the Grand Hall shifted. The former tensions that had simmered beneath the surface of the Confederation for centuries seemed to dissipate. The once divided species, the distrustful, the fearful, now looked to Earth not with wariness, but with hope. For the first time in millennia, they had a common cause, a future built on trust, cooperation, and shared responsibility. While the Reformation was still in its infancy, its success was already palpable. The dissolution of the militaristic factions had begun, their hold on the galaxy steadily weakening. But the true victory lay not in their defeat, but in the creation of something more lasting. A system where every species, from the smallest to the largest, had a voice. A system where justice was not just an ideal, but a reality. For Earth, the mission was clear: to lead with integrity, to ensure that the galaxy's newfound peace would be upheld, and to make sure that humanity's role would be remembered not just for its might, but for its unwavering moral clarity. As the assembly concluded and the delegates dispersed, the galaxy looked forward to an era of unprecedented cooperation. Earth had led the charge for reform, and now its legacy would be cemented in the annals of galactic history. The galaxy, once fractured and on the brink of collapse, now stood united, stronger than ever before. And Earth, standing at the forefront of this new era, knew that the journey had only just begun. The stars no longer whispered of war, they now spoke of hope. A hope that humanity had given the galaxy, a hope that would shine for centuries to come. The galaxy was no longer the same. In the aftermath of Earth's bold and unwavering stand, a new order had emerged, one founded not on the principles of dominance or coercion, but on the ideals of fairness, justice, and mutual respect. The final vestiges of corruption within the Confederation had been swept away, and a system of governance had taken root, designed to uplift all species, no matter their size or influence. But this transformation had come at a steep price, a price paid in the blood of Daniel Harris, the ambassador who had been the beacon of humanity's commitment to peace. In the heart of the Confederation's capital, the final memorial for Daniel Harris was unveiled. A monument like no other, towering above the gathered representatives, the statue stood as a solemn reminder of the human sacrifice that had ignited this new era. It wasn't merely a tribute to a single life lost. It was a tribute to humanity's unwavering resolve to stand against oppression. The design of the monument was simple yet profound. carved from the stone of a distant world that had been a symbol of unity and peace for countless species. At its base, inscribed in the language of every Confederation species, were the words, "In his death, the galaxy found its soul." For Earth, this was not just a memorial, it was the mark of a legacy forged through sacrifice, driven by the pursuit of what was right, not what was easy. As President Laura Wilson stood before the monument, she allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. The weight of it all settled in her chest. The galaxy had been forever changed by one man's death, and by the resolve of a species that refused to bow in the face of intimidation. With Earth's triumph now undeniable, the final message was delivered. A message that would echo throughout the ages. We will not bow to intimidation. President Wilson's voice resonated across the galaxy as she addressed the Confederation's council. A voice that had once been a whisper among many, now the voice of a united force that had no equal. "Let this message be clear," she said, her words steady. "We are here not to conquer, but to guide. Not to dominate, but to protect. And in that protection, we shall create a future where every species can thrive in peace. We have learned, as have all of you, that true strength does not lie in subjugation, but in cooperation." And it was through this very message that Earth began its new role in galactic governance. Not as an imposing superpower, but as a guiding force for equality. The reformed Confederation, now restructured to promote equality among all its member species, began to flourish. The influence of Earth was undeniable, its voice central to every decision that would shape the future of the galaxy. What had once been a fractured, fear-driven coalition now stood united, empowered by the principles that Earth had instilled: justice, fairness, and the belief that all species, regardless of history or might, deserved a chance to thrive. The political shifts were swift and monumental. No longer did the dominant factions of the past hold sway. The Vorn, the Draxel, and the Shaltari were no longer feared tyrants. They were now partners in a new system where no species could impose their will upon another. A new council was formed, one where every species from the most advanced to the most marginalized had equal representation, and Earth, in all its strength and wisdom, stood as its cornerstone. Jordan Harris, Daniel's son, had assumed his father's mantle. His work was not yet done. Now a key figure in the new system, Jordan led negotiations to further dismantle the militaristic factions within the Confederation, focusing on transforming them into forces of peace and cooperation. The weight of his father's death remained heavy on his shoulders, but he no longer wore it as a burden. Instead, he used it as a beacon, guiding the galaxy toward a future of shared prosperity. As the first sessions of the new Confederation Council took place, the galaxy watched, and hope blossomed where fear once reigned. The true power of humanity, its compassion, its resolve, and its unwavering commitment to justice, was not just acknowledged, but embraced. For the first time, Earth was not the outsider, it was the leader. In the days that followed, representatives from every corner of the galaxy arrived in Earth's capital, a testament to the new era that had dawned. The speeches and celebrations were not just about Earth's victory, but about what that victory meant for the future. They were a testament to the shared resolve of a galaxy that had chosen to unite, rather than fracture further. History will remember this moment, Jordan Harris declared during his first speech to the new council. Not as the day Earth rose to power, but as the day the galaxy rose to justice. And so the legacy of Daniel Harris was sealed. His death had sparked a revolution, but it was Earth's commitment to fairness that had truly changed the course of history. The legacy wasn't about vengeance or conquest. It was about the lasting impact of one man's sacrifice and the belief that, even in the darkest times, there was a path forward. A path that led toward a brighter future for all. As the final resolution was passed and the galaxy moved forward into this new chapter, the legacy of Earth's role in the Confederation became undeniable. Earth had not just claimed its place among the stars, it had paved the way for a galaxy where peace, equality, and justice were not just aspirations, but reality. The galaxy had been transformed. Earth had set the example, and in that example, the stars no longer whispered of conquest and fear. They now spoke of hope and of a new future. A future forged in the image of one man's sacrifice and one species' commitment to never back down from what was right.